The alarm on my wrist screamed at 4 in the morning, and I already knew before I looked at the screen. My ship was gone. Not damaged, not moved to another dock. Gone. The berth where the wayward debt had sat for 6 years was empty, just scorch marks on the deck plating, and a dead access panel hanging open like a broken jaw. I stood there in my sleep clothes, barefoot on cold metal, staring at empty space where my entire life used to be parked. I am Ethan Cole, and 3 weeks before this moment, I did not know that losing a ship could feel like losing a person. I found that out the hard way, standing in an empty dock on a station called Varen's Reach, at the edge of nowhere, with nothing but a tracking chip buried under the pilot's seat, and a stubbornness that everyone around me called foolish. The station dockmaster, a heavy man named Owen with tired eyes and no patience left in him, told me to forget it. He said ships vanish out here every week. He said the smart ones let it go and buy a new one with the insurance credit. I told him I didn't have insurance credit, because insurance costs more than the ship was worth, and he just shook his head like I was already a dead man walking. I did not let it go. I spent 2 days' worth of savings buying information from a broker named Dale, a thin man who dealt in rumors and stolen manifests in the back corner of a noodle stall. He told me my ship's transponder had pinged once near the Corvic asteroid strings, then gone dark. He told me that ships that go dark that fast are either scrapped for parts within a day, or they are running from something worse than a repo crew. I bet on the second option, because the first one meant my ship was already dust, and I was not ready to accept that. I hitched a ride on a supply hauler heading toward the strings, paid the pilot with the last of my credits, and a promise of future work I probably could not keep, and spent 4 days in a cargo hold that smelled like engine coolant and old fruit, watching a tracking screen that refused to update. On the 5th day, the ping came back. It was faint, buried in a dead shipping lane that had not seen traffic in years, the kind of place ships go to get forgotten. My ship was sitting there, powered down to almost nothing, drifting slow and quiet like it was hiding. The hauler pilot, a woman named Priya, who had grown fond of my stubbornness somewhere around day 3, dropped me close enough that I could take a small transport pod the rest of the way. She told me if I did not come back in 6 hours, she was leaving without asking questions. I told her that was fair. I want to be honest about what I expected to find. I expected pirates. I expected a scrap crew mid-strip, tearing my engine apart for parts to sell on the black market. I expected a fight, or at the very least, an argument I would probably lose. I did not expect silence. The airlock accepted my old override codes without protest, which told me whoever took my ship either did not know how to change the security or did not care to. The corridor lights were down to a dim red emergency glow. Life support hummed at the lowest setting I had ever heard it run, barely keeping the air breathable. My boots echoed too loud against the deck plating, and every step felt like walking into a place that was holding its breath. The cargo hold door was sealed from the inside. That should have stopped me. A sealed door meant someone had made a choice to lock themselves in, and locked doors on stolen ships usually mean something you do not want to open. But it was my door, my ship, my life, and I overrode the lock with hands that were shaking more than I wanted to admit. The hold did not look like my cargo hold anymore. The shelving I used to store salvage parts had been torn down and rebuilt into something else entirely. A strange curved structure wrapped in insulation foam stripped from 3 different bulkheads. Coolant lines that used to feed the ship's cooling system had been rerouted and wound around it like a nest of pale veins. It looked less like a hiding spot and more like something built with careful, desperate hands, someone working against a clock they could not stop. And in the middle of it, inside a pod welded together from pieces of my own ship, there was a woman. She was not human. I understood that the moment the emergency lighting caught her skin, which had a pale, almost silver quality to it, like moonlight caught under glass. Her hair was black and long, spread out around her like it had been arranged, not tangled. Her eyes were closed, and for one long, terrible second, I thought I had found a corpse instead of a thief. Then her eyes opened, and they were solid black from edge to edge, no white showing at all, and I felt every hair on my arms rise at once. I had a weapon on my hip. I want to be honest about that too. My hand went to it out of pure instinct, the kind that does not ask permission from your brain first. But she did not move to attack. She did not even flinch. She just watched me with an expression that was too tired to be afraid, like fear was a luxury she had already spent somewhere else. "You found it faster than I calculated," she said. Her voice was quiet, careful, shaped around a language that was clearly not her first one. "I intended to return your ship. Eventually, I apologized that this was not possible sooner." I stood there with my hand still on my weapon, staring at a woman who had just apologized to me from inside a pod she built out of my own spare parts, and I honestly did not know what to say first. "Who are you?" I finally managed. "And why does my ship look like a science experiment?" "My name is Calith," she said. "I am Nocturne. I do not expect that name to mean anything to you. Most of your people believe we are only stories, told to frighten new colonists away from the dark corners of the map." I had heard the word before, in passing, in the kind of drunken station talk that nobody takes seriously. Stories about a species that lived in the dark, that fed on things they should not feed on, that hunted along abandoned trade routes and left ships empty and crews missing. I had never believed those stories. Standing in front of her, I still did not fully believe them, because the woman in front of me looked less like a monster and more like someone who had been running for a very long time and had nothing left to run with. "You stole my ship," I said, because I needed to say something that was simple and true, something to hold on to while everything else in the room felt strange. "Yes," she said, without any attempt to soften it. "It was the only unregistered vessel fast enough to leave in time. I am aware of what that cost you. I intended to compensate you, if I survived long enough to find a way." "In time for what?" Something in her face changed then, a kind of grief that looked too large for the tired body holding it. "My homeworld no longer exists in any way that matters. 3 fleets came for what remained of my people. I do not know how many of us are left. I do not know if I am the last one, or simply the last one who managed to run far enough." The hold went very quiet after that. Even the low hum of the life support system seemed to fade into the background, like the ship itself was listening. I had a choice standing right there, and I knew it the moment she finished speaking. I could call this in. First confirmed contact with a Nocturne, alive, cooperative, sitting in a hold on my own ship. That kind of information was worth more credits than I had ever seen in one place, enough to buy a real ship, enough to never worry about dock fees again. Every rational part of my brain was already doing the math. But there was another part of me, quieter, and a lot more stubborn, that kept looking at the way her hands trembled slightly against the edge of the pod, the way her breathing sounded thin and careful, like she was rationing even that. "You're starving," I said. It was not a question. She did not deny it. "Human supplies are not compatible with what my body requires. I have been careful. I did not want to test the alternative on your crew, had you brought one. There's no crew. It's just me." Something shifted in her expression. Surprise maybe, or something closer to disbelief. "Then you came here alone, knowing this ship might be crewed by something dangerous, on the word of a broker and a signal ping. Wouldn't be the first time I made a bad decision." She almost smiled at that. It was small, and it looked unfamiliar on her face, like a muscle she had not used in a long time. I holstered my weapon. I do not fully know why, even now, looking back on it. Maybe it was the way she had apologized before I even asked for one. Maybe it was the exhaustion in her voice when she talked about her homeworld. Maybe I am simply the kind of person who cannot walk away from something that needs help, even when helping is the least reasonable choice available to me. "What do you need?" I asked. "To actually survive the next few days, not just get by." She studied me for a long moment, like she was trying to work out whether I was asking out of kindness or calculation. "My biology requires a transfer of energy that your species would find deeply uncomfortable to hear described in detail. I have gone this long by rationing what little I brought with me. It is nearly gone. Can it come from me?" The question surprised her so much that she actually sat up straighter in the pod, wincing slightly at the movement. "You do not know what you are offering. I know my ship kept you alive long enough to get found. I know you apologized for stealing it before you asked me for anything. And I know that if I leave you here to run out of whatever you're rationing, I'm going to spend the rest of my life wondering what happened to the woman who built a hiding spot out of my spare parts, instead of just leaving me stranded on that dock. She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face like she was searching for the trick in it, the hidden cost, the catch that her people had probably learned to expect from every offer of kindness. When she did not find one, something in her shoulders loosened, just slightly. "Your species was described to me very differently before I left," she said. "I was told humans are quick to fear what they do not understand, and quicker still to destroy it, before understanding becomes necessary. Some of us are like that," I admitted. "Most of us, maybe. But some of us just really don't like watching something die in a cargo hold we happen to own." That earned a real laugh from her this time, short and surprised, like the sound had caught her off guard as much as it caught me. It was a good sound. It made the tension in the room ease just a little, enough that I finally let myself breathe normally again. I offered my arm. She hesitated for a long moment, black eyes searching mine one more time, and then, carefully, gently, in a way that felt more like a question than an action, she accepted. I will not describe what happened next in detail, because it does not need describing, and because what mattered was not the process, but what came after. When it was done, some of the color had returned to her skin, faint as it was, and her breathing had steadied into something that sounded less like rationing and more like actual rest. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That is not a debt I will forget." "You can start by telling me what those 3 fleets actually are," I said, sitting down across from her pod, "because if they're still hunting you, they're probably still hunting this ship too, and I'd like to know what I'm flying away from." Her expression sobered quickly. "They are enforcement fleets from 3 different systems that share a long history with my people, none of it kind. My kind were driven into the dark corners of space generations ago, blamed for things some of us did, and many of us did not. When the fleets finally decided to finish what they started, they did not stop to ask which of us deserved it and which did not. That's not justice, that's just cleanup." "I have come to the same conclusion," she said, a dry edge creeping into her voice. "Unfortunately, my opinion does not change their course heading. I thought about the tracking chip under my pilot seat, the one that had led me here in the first place. If it had led me to her, it could lead someone else to her too, someone with fewer questions and much worse intentions." "We need to move," I said, standing up. "That chip brought me here. It can bring them here too." She was already climbing carefully out of the pod, testing her strength with slow, deliberate movements. "Agreed. Though I feel I should mention that I disabled several of your ship's systems in order to build this. Repairs will be necessary before we can move quickly." "Of course you did," I said, but there was no real frustration in it, just the tired amusement of a man who had already accepted that his simple ship recovery had turned into something much larger than he planned for. We worked together for the next several hours, and I discovered something in that time that surprised me more than her eyes, or her name, or the fleets hunting her. She was, without question, one of the best hands with a ship's systems that I had ever worked alongside. She understood coolant flow and power redistribution in ways that took me years to learn, and she had done it all while starving and hiding from people who wanted her gone from existence. "You could have just stripped the ship for a shuttle and left me with nothing," I said at one point, watching her reroute a power conduit with quick, confident hands. "Instead, you kept the engine intact enough to still fly." "I am a thief," she said, not looking up from her work, "but I am not without principles. Taking your ship was necessary. Ruining it beyond use was not." "That's oddly comforting." "I did consider it comforting, given the circumstances," she replied, and there was that small, unfamiliar smile again. By the time the last system came back online, the ship's engine humming steady and strong beneath our feet, the tracking screen lit up with 3 new signals converging on our position from different directions. The fleets. They were close. Closer than I liked, and they were moving with the kind of coordinated pattern that told me they were not going to ask polite questions when they arrived. "Time to go," I said, dropping into the pilot seat. Kalith took the seat beside me without hesitation, her hands moving to the secondary console, like she had sat there 100 times before. "I would suggest the shipping lane to the west. It is old and mostly abandoned, but it will let us avoid their sensor net for a while. You memorized the sensor net of a hostile fleet while hiding in my cargo hold. I had very little else to occupy my time, she said, and I found myself laughing despite everything. A real laugh that felt good, after days of stress and worry. We launched clear of the dead shipping lane just as the first fleet signal crossed into scanning range, close enough that I felt my pulse spike, but not close enough to catch us before we hit the jump point Kalith had already calculated on her console. The ship shuddered once, twice, and then the stars outside the viewport smeared into long streaks of light as we made the jump clear of the system. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The adrenaline slowly drained out of my hands as I watched the empty stars settle back into their normal, still shapes outside the viewport, and I realized my ship was mine again, flying steady, engine humming the way it always had. Except now, there was someone else in the second seat, who had no reason to trust me, and every reason to run the first chance she got. She did not run. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly, breaking the silence. "You had every reason to hand me over. The reward would have solved every problem you had." I thought about the answer for a long moment, because I owed her something true, not just something easy. Because the last time something scared me this badly, it was losing this ship, and you kept her alive better than the man I bought her from ever did. Seemed unfair to let 3 fleets finish the job you refused to. She studied me for a long moment, that same careful searching expression from the cargo hold, like she still expected to find the trick hidden somewhere in my words. When she did not find one, something in her finally relaxed completely, like a held breath let out after a very long time. "Then I suppose," she said, "the wayward debt has 2 owners now." "Guess it does," I said, and for the first time in 3 weeks, I was not chasing anything. I was just flying, steady and quiet, with company I never expected, and somehow did not want to lose. Outside the viewport, the stars kept their distance, endless and patient, and somewhere behind us, 3 fleets searched empty space for a ship that had already slipped away into the dark, carrying 2 people who had decided, without much discussion, that they were not done with each other yet.